Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to a wonderful Wednesday webinar, where the wisdom being dispensed this week is from Emily from Take Back Water. Amazing campaign. They're rallying together people all across the country to really campaign about what's going on with our privatised water. And Emily's going to tell us about what we can do about it tonight. And, you know, water is life. We really need to reclaim our waterways, not just for the human beings, for all the species we share it with. So over to Emily. Thank you very much for coming. Over to you.
And firstly, thank you so much for inviting us. So I'm just going to kind of give a bit of a kind of overview, firstly, of what I'm going to be talking about today. So essentially, kind of thinking about, the context of water, like, our right to water has been destroyed essentially by privatization of the water companies in this country. In this kind of presentation, I'm going to focus mainly on Scotland and Wales, because no, sorry, let me rephrase that. England and Wales, because Scotland has its own system, and we're campaigning around England and Wales. So we're going to kind of look at our right to water being destroyed, kind of a little bit more about what's been going on with the water industries, of course, the kind of environmental impact of water companies, sewage releases, how people have responded so far, because there's been some brilliant campaigns going on about this, especially those in coastal areas. But then our position on how we can fight back for a mass non-payment campaign. So firstly, just want to kind of talk about water as the commons. So what I mean by that is that, commons refer to resources that should be available to all of us. Privatization, particularly from 1989, involved the transfer of provision of water and waste services in England and Wales from state to the private sector through the sale of like 10 regional authorities. So on the first day of trading, like the average gain for investors was like 40% in profit. And at the time, these kind of newly created private owned like water companies, they paid out about 7.6 billion to the regional water authorities. There was some research done recently by the Equity Trust that has estimated that actually about £80 billion has been paid out in dividends to the investors between 1991 and 2023. And what we've seen is like each year, the the investors are kind of gaining more money from this, while at the same time we're seeing an increase of sewage spills and also seeing no improvements in the infrastructure for water. Kind of thinking about this a bit more, like there's some research done by University of Greenwich in about 2017, so it's a little bit outdated now, and it kind of suggested that in England, people were paying 2.3 billion more for water every year and sewage bills than if the water had remained under state ownership. We're now at a point of crisis where the rise of inflation and interest rates have left lots of water with unsubstantial debt loads, Thames Water being particularly one of these. It's us, the customers, who are going to be paying this, paying off this debt. What we've seen as well this year is a sharp increase in water bills rising. On top of this, we know that the water companies have wanted to raise the bills higher than they actually have. And I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of which water region and which bills have been going up. At the moment, from April 1st, bills have gone up, but at the same time, we know that the water companies have taken Ofwat to the Competition Market Authority to appeal against this decision, and they want to basically raise the water bills even more. I just kind of want to talk a little bit more about the environmental impact. I'm sure a lot of people here will be very familiar and know a lot more about this area than I do. It'll be great to hear more from people after I've shared these slides. As of today, and this was in the news, water companies have beaten their record and have spilled out raw sewage for 3.61 million hours into rivers and seas in England in 2024. This equivalent to about 1,231 times a day there's sewage discharged and flowing into the UK waterways, according to Earthwatch. There's a case where sometimes when there's too much demand and heavy rainfall, that water companies can discharge sewage this way, but we're seeing it time and time again. This is being abused. People are essentially getting sick from swimming in the seas and rivers. Like there's this really helpful map here from kind of surfers against sewage, where you can kind of check whether it's safe to swim, and they have location, about 600 areas that they cover, like rivers and coastal parts, to see whether it's safe to swim. And sometimes when it's been a particularly heavy rainfall, it's just not, and they update recent sewage discharge into the area. On top of this thickness, it also takes away people's right to be able to enjoy things like the seaside and the rivers around us. And I come from a psychology background, and we know that water, being in nature, being near water for even 20 minutes improves people overall well-being. We know that swimming in the seas has become more popular as well as a pastime, and this is one of the few pastimes that is actually quite free under which is quite difficult in this day and age. The sickness from sea swimming, people are experiencing all sorts of things, whether it's kind of people from doing river swims where they've kind of experienced diarrhea and vomiting, people at risk of E. coli. In fact, there was one researcher who found that he had bacterial pneumonia following a swim in the sea that is likely connected to a sewage discharge that happened hours before he took to the water. On top of that, I've spoken more about human, but it's really damaging the wildlife. Fish are being killed off. There's research kind of showing that fish that are being harmed from Atlantic salmon, brown trout, European eel, which is already quite a rare species, flounders, stickleback, stone loaches are a few to name. And it's not just the fish, it's other animals that are an important part of the ecosystem, whether it's kind of from insect level of mayflies to different types of birds, such as dippers, to other creatures like mammals, such as otters, to crabs. It's pretty dire what's happening, the environmental impact from this all. Despite all this, limited investment, environmental damage, catastrophic failures, water bills have increased. Some companies are charging more than others. So we know that Southern Water has had the highest increase of charge for the bills coming up between 2025 to 2030. It's a 47% increase over those 5 years. Interestingly, Southern Water is the company that's often been fined probably the most for its sewage dumping and awful record it has. That's just kind of a bit of an overview of how much this is going up. And this came into effect on April 1st. Millions of us were already impacted by an increase of things such as our council tax, phone bills, energy bills. It's just getting harder and harder to afford to live. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the good work that people have been doing and trying to do to campaign this. Different groups have been writing to their MP. Others have been making petitions. We've had the Restore Nature Now protests. I think there was a lot of hope that when the Labour Party came to power, that water could possibly be nationalised. And there are kind of two groups that I want to kind of mention here who I think Take Back Water is on a very similar level to, which is Don't Pay for Dirty Water and Boycott Dirty Water. There's a focus on not paying for the sewage part of the bill, kind of challenging the water companies on doing this. Our position as Take Back Water is that we want to start putting forward the idea that we need to build a mass non-payment campaign. It's all well that people are individually taking steps to boycott the water companies and paying unjust prices, but we feel it has to be larger than this and more of this involved. And it's not just an environmental issue here, but a justice issue as well. Why should we be paying more for the water companies when billions have been spent out on dividends to their shareholders? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some recent examples of mass non-payment. One of the first ones that kind of comes to mind in the past plus 30 years or more was around poll tax. So a lot of people in 80s and 90s, poll tax was suggested by Thatcherite government. A lot of people started organising around this, and it was dated by the early 90s, 17 million people refused to pay. And, this is one of the things that contributed to the downfall of the Thatcher government. There's been brilliant campaigns in Ireland against water charges. So we've had back in the mid-90s in Dublin, there was an attempt to introduce water charges. A lot of people boycotted their bills and this was stopped. In 2015, there was another mass boycott against the Irish water companies. 57% of people didn't pay their first bill, their water company. And then in time, this was stopped by the government because people were just refusing to pay. Another example we had recently was in the summer of 2022 of the Don't Pay campaign, which a few of our members of Take Back Water were involved in. This was a campaign in response to almost an 80% price hike. We had lots of people being involved, very organic campaign where people were kind of setting up their own local groups and saying they'll be, from 1st of October, they're going to be striking and refusing to pay. What happened is that it didn't reach the need for that strike. What we saw is that Liz Truss government stepped in just beforehand, put caps on the energy. So those are kind of some recent examples of a mass non-payment campaign. The question might be for a lot of people, why water bills? Why now? There's so much going on all the time. But we also just want to highlight the vulnerability of some of the water companies. Thames Water is particularly vulnerable, and it's quite possible it will collapse within the next year or so. It's the largest water company providing services to 16 million people, and it's the most vulnerable, making it quite a good target. But also we want to highlight that, this campaign is to focus across England and Wales, not just Thames Water. So introducing a little bit more about Take Back Water. So we're an alliance of activists who come together thinking, okay, a mass non-payment campaign is going to be the way forward to deal with the water companies. Our objective is to win full democratic public ownership of water. And we believe that mass non-payment through financial disobedience is the tactic we need. Lots of, people have tried with protests, writing to MPs, doing petitions, but we're not being heard. This non-payment tactic will force the government to act. And, we've seen it happen in the past of previous non-payment campaigns. Our plan is to build a powerful and participatory movement. We believe that ordinary people, such as us in this room, can, be self-organised and organise this mass social political intervention. And, we're open to anyone who wants to join us. Everything we do is off our own backs. A lot of us are working full time in other jobs, and we're doing this voluntary. We don't have any institutional backing or funding. And, we rely on donations to make our leaflets and stickers happen. And we've all kind of used skills we've learned across the year of different parts of activist movement to help us. A good thing about water is that it's lower risk than energy bills. You can't have your water cut off. In fact, when people are in poverty and asking for advice from Citizens Advice, they say the first bill to kind of stop paying is the water bill because it's lowest risk. But we're also saying here, it's not just about poverty, but it's a injustice issue that there are such higher increases of bills and we're paying, but the water companies aren't. We're trying to bring people together with this campaign. So a little bit more about Take Back Water. So what we've been asking people to do is to pledge to strike and say they will not pay their water bills. And on our website, we're almost at 10,000, which is no small feat, but we're going to need many, many more people to be involved for this to work. So far, we've sent out 40,000 leaflets and about 15,000 stickers across England and Wales. We've been involved at leafleting different demonstrations or meetings, but also just kind of sending our leaflets from our base in London. On the whole, when you talk to people about water bills and what the water companies have been doing, they support what we're saying. 82% of the public want water to be some form of publicly owned or nationalisation. That was from a poll by YouGov, I think in July 2024. We commissioned a poll with Neon, who found that 1 in 2 Britons see non-payment as a legitimate tactic with dealing with water bills. And then just a bit more about our campaign, we've been kind of covered. We've had our spokespeople talk about this on BBC, LBC, Independent. A bit more information about getting involved, if you'd be interested in doing so, is that at the moment we're asking people in pledging to strike back against the water bills through, kind of committing, I'd be up for participating in non-mass payment. It'd be great for people to order leaflets and stickers and distribute to your networks. You'd be welcome to come down to our base in London, help volunteers send leaflets out and get to know us. What we're having next is what we call a community organizer meeting. So we want people to feel confident to go out and start organising around this issue. So we're going to have an online meeting to make it accessible for people in different parts of the country and talk a little bit more about what we've been doing, and hearing what other people have been doing in their area, and kind of putting people in touch together, based on what water build they're under, and then also their location, so they can kind of meet together and kind of organically grow as part of the movement. Maybe get together and do a stall, for example, or go out leafleting in different areas that are local to them. Information about future assemblies that we'll be doing will also be shared via our emails. So just to have share a little bit more contact information for us. So we're asking people to pledge to strike. We've got our email address here, links to Facebook, social media, Instagram, X, and TikTok. That's just kind of a bit of an overview of the campaign, where we're at so far. Thank you.
Wow, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Emily. Very informative, and really shows some of the state of the UK waters at the moment. Okay, that's yeah, very powerful presentation. Thank you very much. Like some of your slides say, about 82% of the British population are with us and want some change. But just to say there, Emily, water is life. I think some of us are involved with the, Dakota Access Pipeline and various other campaigns here in Britain. We had, I think, the Henley Mermaids, a group, come and did a presentation a little while ago. Any way we can help your campaign and support, it's really, really important. And I think it's a campaign that cuts across all cultures, classes, creeds in our society that would get involved, because water is a basic human right and really, really needed by everybody. So we've got a few questions or feedbacks or comments here.
You're asking people to pledge to strike. When is it conditional commitment? Is there a date when you're asking everyone to stop doing it? Is there a number that you're waiting for? And then my second question is, don't pay for dirty water campaign seems to be saying let's do this already. So how are the two campaigns linking up? What's the relationship between them?
So in regards to calling a date for strike, at the moment it's getting as many people to pledge. We've got nearly 10,000, which is great. We still don't think it's enough for it to have an impact on the water companies. Like, what we want to do is kind of build it to, like, kind of keep on building up these numbers to a point that actually even the threat of a mass strike against the water bills would be enough to get changes going. We've not got quite a number, and it's been quite interesting doing this compared to Don't Pay, as Don't Pay really took off. Hundreds of thousands were signing up within like a few months, whereas this has been a much more slow burn.
You mean the Don't Pay Energy campaign?
Yeah, Don't
Something
Pay Energy
involved with, right?
campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been quite different in that regard. We haven't called a number yet because we're quite worried about, if we say a set number and we don't reach it, the campaign's kind of failed and people are going to kind of lose trust in it. With us, in regards to relationship with Don't Pay for Dirty Water, I know a couple of people involved in Take Back Water, like Angus and Alessio, was speaking with them when we first started. And my understanding is that they're calling for people to just start boycotting, cancelling their direct debits here and now, whereas we're waiting for it to be en masse to have that impact.
And are you looking for a renationalisation or just a reform of the system then? Because that's what the energy system, there was a sticking plaster put on it, and now it's just been ripped off, and nothing's changed. We're back to where we were.
Answer that, because we're still kind of a small embryonic version in the campaign. What we want to do is really escalate this so that different groups under different water regions that are organising around this, and then kind of make it a case that people feel firstly confident to strike. We're kind of saying initially to have a set amount of time for the strike. Like, we're thinking about minimize the risk as much as possible so people want to get involved, because I think when we talk to people about this, they're very worried about legal repercussions or impact on their credit score, for example. And what we've kind of understood anecdotally from others is that it takes about 90 days for the process of water companies contacting you, asking for the money, trying to escalate the non-payment. So what we've envisioned is to build this campaign so large that we've got lots of different people across the country who are pledging together to strike at a certain time, and that can also keep it quite unpredictable border water companies
Hmm.
as well, because they're very dependent on people paying at the moment, especially Thames, where it's so fragile.
Sorry, Emily, I just missed the first few minutes of your presentation, but what I'm not clear on, as you talked about, the aim is to get Thames Water back into deprivatized, as it were, or was there another aim, like with our local water companies?
We're talking about England and Wales, water companies across England and Wales. One of the reasons why Thames is mentioned often is that a few of us are in the Thames region, but also it is the most vulnerable at the moment financially.
Yeah, but what I'm not in London. I'm in Bristol, so it's Wessex Water and Bristol, which is owned by a Malaysian conglomerate, which is diabolical, really. And so that's what I'm not clear on. If I joined the strike, which I'm really happy to do, is the ask going to be, for people in under Wessex Water to ask for that to be sort of like renationalised, or what is the ask? I'm still not understanding it.
For us at this time, we want to collapse the water companies through mass non-payment and want them to be brought back into public ownership. I think there's a lot of questions around what renationalisation can look like, and I, for one, don't have the answers. And I know that there have been some quite good work on academics and economists about kind of an alternative solution to this. And I think some of this work was when Corbyn was kind of suggesting this for the Labour Party to bring back internationalisation. But the idea is that it is a mass non-payment campaign. This is kind of a presentation of where we're at right now. This is a group that's constantly evolving. We want more people to get involved. We have this next event on the 29th for people across the country to kind of get involved and hear more about what's happening in their region.
So just to be clear on what you said, Emily, you're saying that you're calling for all the privatised water companies to be nationalised across, England and the UK, I guess. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do we have a timeline that you're sort of going to be aiming for in terms of the action?
It's when at the moment it is building this pledge system.
Yeah.
So, once that kind of gets to a set level, and we want to continue having open meetings and assemblies with people about the timeline, as we don't want to be like, the idea is that as many people get involved as possible. It's open, and I wouldn't feel comfortable if it's just like a few of us in a room calling for people all at once to like stop paying their water bills. It needs to be done in the most kind of democratic way possible at a timing feels right. It also depends on how people respond to the campaign as well, because we were thinking, okay, 1st of April, oil bills are going up, maybe more people are going to be doing something about water, but it's kind of not been the case. But if it's a case when 6 months to 12 months where it goes that the competition's marking I always mix up the CMA, competitions marketing authority, that are kind of currently competitions market authority, who are kind of where the water companies are appealing Ofwat's regulations on how much the bills can cost. If it turns out that they say, okay, Ofwat's wrong, the water companies can charge more, and they start charging a lot more, perhaps that's going to be a different story again, where people have had enough.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's an evolving campaign and something we've all got to work out more and get involved with and see how we can lift it up.
Big up Emily is what I want to say. And I do just want to comment that this will be a slow grow for various reasons. We're all knackered, and we're all, not all, but loads of us are, and there's loads of us really cynical and disillusioned about how best to make change after the asset strip after asset strip after asset strip that's gone on in our bloody country. I think it's good to feel the pulse and the numbers of people who are engaging as Emily's described, because otherwise you just, all out, it's just a posture, and we will have no strength without numbers. So good on you, Emily, and I'll spread the word in my area and networks. I paid money to Thames Water, and they just landed in court, didn't they, and got backed to go into deeper debt. So yeah, let's bring them down.
I wanted to ask whether, Emily, whether you worked with Clive Lewis on his water bill. And then I also wanted to say that if XR's campaign don't pay for dirty water, if it's basically the same thing, sort of by a different name. And thank you, Dawn, for that inspiring comments though, and also Emily for a brilliant presentation. Thank you both. But I'm tired as well. I'm really tired, fed up. And we did the don't pay for dirty water. You get a lot of pressure and they threaten you and it's not very nice, and then it just gets worse. And then we were going to move house, so I felt obliged to pay the bill. And I'm just knackered and tired from everything and from trying. So it's great to see some younger people, pushing this forward. If everybody, if they don't pay for dirty water lot join up with you, or you together, sometimes I feel, there's so many of us in the environmental movement all fighting the same thing in different groups all over the country, doing the same, but we just all need to come together. And that's why it's nice to have like the marches in London and all that jazz. But I'm in Severn Trent, and so I don't know if you know off the top of your hand how many have pledged to stop paying in that area. It would just help know that there's more than just the handful of us.
We haven't been involved with working with Clive Lewis. I know that he's been doing some good work on this as well, but we as a campaign personally haven't been involved. I think some of that reason for us is that there's not much trust towards MPs at the moment. From none of them are kind of outright, none of the parties want to nationalise water or bring it into public ownership. And what we really want to do is kind of let people to become empowered themselves and know that they can do something about this. In regards, for us compared to boycott dirty water, the main, is we both share the same idea. The main difference is a question of tactics, where they are asking people to do this, today and cancel the direct debit, whereas we're holding off until we get to like a critical mass. And the reason is we don't want people, what we're hearing is that when people are cancelling, they are getting hounded and it is tiring them out, and it does cause a lot of anxiety when you're getting these horrible letters from different companies. Whereas what we're trying to do is build a movement where, there are hundreds of thousands of us all doing this together, targeting different water companies, and knowing you're not alone while doing this is the different kind of tactic, really. I don't have the stats about where everyone is and where people have signed up, but I know from kind of the group chats that I've been involved in for this meeting, the community organising one, people are joining, are in different water districts. Quite a few have been under Severn Water as well. So if you can, do feel free to come along, and it will be an opportunity to meet them, because what we're planning on doing is having a bit of an overview and then breaking down into Zoom rooms with people like we did before, with people in different areas.
Cool. Some of you were involved with Don't Pay the UK Energy, and I was just wondering, what are the learnings from that campaign? How did it go? Sounds like it was quite successful at points, and how I'm always interested in how different movements and campaigns learn from each other. So how can the learnings from the UK Energy one be applied to the water? And just a couple of other points was, to demystify the process for people. This is what's going to happen to you if you refuse water together. Because sometimes when you take the fear out of being arrested or withholding your water bill, so that people know this is what's going to happen. And you mentioned something about they can't actually cut you off.
Because I wasn't personally involved with it, but one of the things that they did was called on 1st of October, if there was a set amount of people, I can't remember if it was like 3 million or 1 million, but they had a set number that they would call who said they would not pay. So now it's quite interesting because you had different pollings happening and different people, kind of organisations saying that, okay, 3 million people are not going to pay from the 1st of October. But for the campaign itself, it was something like 500,000 have committed to not paying. So in one way, people kind of see, because the strike didn't happen and the action didn't happen, it failed. However, it did push the government to act. You know, we had to have these energy caps. Someone said earlier, it's a very good point, that it was like a sticking plaster for now, but we're seeing energy bills kind of creeping up again. But it did, you know, the threat of such action caused the government to act. Some of the other learnings, people were quite untrusting of the campaign because people didn't know who we were, who were involved. For a lot of people, it kind of came across this very slick website, and like there's a lot of accusation of like being funded by different people, and it was like, no, just a group of volunteers using their skills from their day job to make this happen. And there was a bit of conspiracy around it. The other bit of feedback as well was,
you'll always get that on a few campaigns, you know. Moscow Gold's probably funding a lot of it, you know.
Yeah. The other thing as well is, and I'm just recalling conversations I had, how different people can get involved. So for some people who are on the prepayment meters, they couldn't just not pay. That's different. And I think a lot of people felt a bit left out of the campaign and kind of excluded because of it. Whereas with the water campaign, it's a little bit different. Like, I think most people can get involved. Like, sometimes people just can't. They're at higher risk. But we still want people, if they can't necessarily take the action to not pay, getting involved with campaign, having these discussions as well. So those are kind of a bit of a feedback. But the main learning from Don't Pay campaign was having a set number, which we didn't meet, made it look like a failure. So that's why we haven't set a number for this campaign at this time.
Never be too hard on yourselves. Every action makes a difference. And that's good. It's always good to learn from the many movements before us.
It's kind of just a bit more about, I think the lady was Dawn, who was saying that she got harassed for not paying her bills, and that was all really stressful. I was just kind of curious about what they actually told you. It's a bit sort of like what Phoenix was saying. What actually did they do? And please, can you say just what made it so stressful? I mean, it might sound like a daft question, but I just think it would help me decide.
Yeah, I did that Don't Pay for Dirty Water with XR, and I was pleased about it. I did all my research, and everyone was very helpful. And then I was very careful about keeping a note of my letters and replies. And then there was a brilliant Radio 4 bit about water in our area on the 5 o'clock news on Radio 4 one day, and I was desperately making notes, and it was able to include specifics in my next letter. So it went on and on a bit, but then it got nasty. You know, they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. They're rolling in money. They're in debt, but they're not. They're still paying their. And
yeah,
we've got all sorts of issues with new 430 houses are supposed to be built at the top of our town, or where there's aquifers in a green zone which is really wet and I mean, unbelievable. But the water company doesn't care, because think how much money they're going to get from every single house. There's no joined up thinking, and so the whole thing with all the shit in the water has just drove me. So I was happy to carry on. And I did it, and I did it, and I did it. But the letters do get threatening. But there is support on the little WhatsApp group that we've got. I gave in because we were supposed to be moving house, and that fell down 2 days before we were due to move. So that was another disaster. But I would have carried on, I think. But it was very threatening.
They sent you?
Yes, the letters they send you.
What were they actually saying that suddenly made it ramped it up?
Court orders, pretty much. Yeah, sort of. It got to the stage where, right, this is your last chance. I haven't got my paperwork. I can't remember. I'm not very well at the moment, so my brain isn't working very well, so I've forgotten. Anyway, it wasn't very
That's
nice.
okay. I mean, it's good to work out what the process is. I mean,
Yeah.
Emily, we saying they don't actually have the right to cut off your water supply? Is there something that I did hear that years ago, and I was questioning that they, whatever stage it goes to, they're not actually allowed to cut you off, and maybe they try and force some payment plan or something. But I think the what we need to aim towards here really is, what's the end goal, and the end game is really to get the water re-nationalised. I think it would be great if Tim said something in a minute. Maybe he's talked about in Naples they restored the waters as a commons
I was
kind of
supporting
thing.
Clive because via MP Watch, because he was calling for nationalisation, and it would have been nice if more people had got behind him really. But I've just been flicking through that Naples thing, which looks brilliant. Thanks, Tim, for that.
Yeah, it's just this aspect, like all of us are a bit circumspect about refusing to pay. I mean, I started with don't pay dirty water over a year ago, and I got to the point of going or debt collectors wanting the money, so I paid up at that time. But I've not paid the second one, and they left me alone. But one thing that I always feel like I've got to justify why I'm not paying, and I don't know whether everybody else does, but I took the tack that effectively they're fly tipping my sewage. There's notices all around here about no fly tipping is illegal, and I tried that one with them. I also had some asbestos removed and taken to a legitimate site and got a certificate saying that where it had been taken to. So I took the same tack with Thames Water and said, well, if you can give me a certificate that you are not fly tipping my sewage, I'll pay you. They just said, well, we can't do that. I was taking the tack that if you can tell me where my sewage is being taken and we can monitor the overflows, it will be reasonable for you to reduce everybody's bill during the periods in which they are dumping sewage, which, in my opinion, is better than fining them and obviously put them to a lot of trouble. But they sort of say, oh no, we can't do that, it's up to you to monitor it. I've since got access to their APIs and I can monitor it. I was going to take up the line that these are the days that you've been dumping my sewage, so I'm not paying, but I haven't had the opportunity because you haven't asked me to pay yet. Very reassuring. But to me, and I don't know whether other people feel that way, that I would like to have some reason why I'm not paying and to give some sort of logical, if you can reassure me that you're not fly tipping, I'll pay you. But while you're fly tipping, I'm not going to be party to your illegal actions.
I think that's a beautiful way of putting it, actually, that they're fly tipping into our water supplies and the sewage.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a good angle.
I realise this is in a sense, a campaign with a very narrow, specific aim and purpose. And I do think, I suppose I've always been interested in broader solutions that help everybody. So nobody's stuck out on a limb, sort of having bailiffs coming down the door. And what we need is a completely different view on ownership. This might seem like a long shot and maybe too general, but I think there is a mood in this country towards state ownership. However, I think it has its limits, state ownership, and the model of ownership that I've always been interested in is the commons, which is people who use a resource, organize it, and are responsible for it. And in Naples, it came that the local council didn't want to run the water anymore. And they gave the citizens a choice between, well, bring in a private company, or you can create a commons to organize it. And the citizens did vote for a commons to organize it. And I put up a couple of links where you can see it. I haven't kept track of the history of it. As far as I know, it's successful. I did hear people talking about it in conferences. I mean, people are actually involved in it. And it does seem workable. And particularly as the water is, I mean, unlike electricity, which is like the grid and it's got more problems in a way, water is sort of localized and is split up in several different companies in this country. So you can imagine setting up a water commons for London or for Southern or for Western or whatever the areas are, because it's got a kind of comprehensible boundary to it. And there are certain things which belong to that commons because it's dealing with a particular area. And I'm just interested in it because I think the reason I personally feel that water companies have been ripping us off and just incredibly. And I love Tom Beard's comment about they are fly posting. You know, if we fly tipping, if we're criminals, why aren't they? You know, which I think is a hard way to put it, but is the actual reality. And I don't see why there should be one morality for corporations and another for us. And I think that's a very good sticking point. It's interesting they haven't come up against you again, Tom, because you've got a good reason. And I really support the idea of having very logical reasons. I just mentioned another thing, which is probably complete garbage, but I don't know. I remember in Occupy, there were people not paying on the basis that water used to be part of your council tax, your rates bill. And it wasn't properly sort of adjusted. When that privatization took place, there was something in the rates that still continued. And that's another, I don't know enough about it, but I knew people who did explore that and were not paying on that basis, that it was actually illegal because it was already being collected through the rates, which have now become turned into council tax. In my experiences, England is very sort of, how can I put it? It's always getting caught up on small legal facts like that. And you can sometimes create a lot of change by just coming up with some 12th century statute, you know, that says you can't do something because it's in the law. So that's another avenue to explore. And I agree, we need to look for positive solutions. And I mentioned one other last thing, that next Wednesday on the 23rd of April, War on Want is doing a webinar at 1:30 to 2:30, and it's called Visions for a Global Green New Deal. And it's very much about water, land and food. And it's more international, obviously, than this is, but it might give you ideas for how other countries, because we're so framed by neoliberalism in this country that it's very difficult for us to think outside the box. And
Nice.
we radically need to think outside the box. There are other ways to organize things. It's all man-made. It's not given to us by heaven that water's running this horrific way. It needs to be. So somebody's asked, how would you create a water commons? It will probably be via the government renationalising and then handing on the renationalisation onto a commons, I would imagine. But or if the companies going into difficulties like Thames Water, approach them and saying, we'll take it off your hands for £1, you know, that kind of a thing. You create a company via a commons thing. I mean, I don't know enough detail about it, but all I do know, it has been done. I think that it can be.
That's all really good points, Tim. Great as always. You know that we've got to see water as the commons and the air as the commons, and how do we? It's not just about the land that the commons, and we need a fairer redistribution and things. When we did the Henley River Action webinar a little while ago, Joe Robb was ill, but another guy came to do it. But they explained that what happened to our water companies was they offered them up for privatization, and some massive Australian company bought a massive amount of the water companies, just like our train companies were sold off to Germany and France and other countries. And they said one of the first things this Australian company did was sell, asset strip everything they could lay their hands on. And I think there was a figure there in one of the slides, like 270,000 acres of land. They sold off every piece of land and even treatment works and any infrastructure they could to make money, and then sat back in Australia with glasses of champagne, said, brilliant, we've made £300 million. And now they're asking the government to bail them out for £500 million or whatever it is, because they asset stripped it. And we really need to look at that kind of thing. One of the other ones, just on the international, because Tim mentioned anti-globalization and things, I think it was Colombia. South America has a problem with big water companies and Coca-Cola and other groups like that trying to buy up all the water. And I think in Colombia, is it La Paz is the capital? They tried to sell off all the water to a private company. So, you know, there's a matter of absolute life and death to indigenous people and people of low incomes. So they barricaded every single road in and out of La Paz. All the main 15 roads were blockaded, and they couldn't get any trade in or out. And the whole place shut down for a few days till they agreed not to privatize their water.
La Paz is the capital of Bolivia, and it was a very big news story about Bolivia. The straw that broke the camel's back was when the water companies were trying to stop people collecting rainwater and saying that you could be fined for collecting rainwater, at which point it was a step too far. World Trade Organization, they'd set some rules about the state not being able to own everything. it was an interesting story, but it was Bolivia.
Emily, thank you so much for coming. Really informative, really great campaign. Water is life, Mini Riccioni. Any way our movement and movements and 30 years of activist networks can help, let us know, and we'll put stuff into the chat for the Climate Emergency Centres Network. But over to you for final comment, feedback, or anything we can do to help you.
One thing I wanted to point out is you may have noticed how I've kind of used either public ownership or nationalisation. That's because there can be quite criticisms of nationalisation, like, handing water back to the state. We're not sure how that could look. It could be the case that they fix it up and then sell it out again. So that's why we've been kind of using either nationalisation or public ownership. Personally, I'm in favour for a commons model, like having a commons charter around water and, people having assemblies and being able to care for the water ourselves. It's just to kind of say it's a justice issue. Like, the fact is, we're paying so much for water, the environment is being polluted. Why should a few benefit so much from such an unfair model? And just to kind of go over like the differences of our campaigners, I think what people have been doing is so brave, taking action on their own against the water companies by kind of saying, nope, I'm not paying the bills, this isn't right. Imagine that, but they're kind of being hit by letters and legal action, etc. Now imagine if hundreds of people did this. Okay, that's going to start to get harder for, like, administratively for the water companies to do this. Okay, now imagine thousands to, like, and we're scaling up to tens of thousands, to hundreds of thousands, to millions. If we had millions of households striking back against this and saying, nope, from this day onwards, we're not paying our water bill for a set amount of time, this could really clap some of the water companies. And it would also make the investments for kind of different capital, private equity firms across the world worthless. They're going to want to start getting rid of these water companies because it will no longer be profitable for doing this. So it's part of a wider system. So yeah, just to say thank you so much all for coming, and it's been really helpful to have these like discussions and feedback and comments, and yeah, please do join us.
That's great. No, thank you so much, Emily. Let's all get on board, reclaim water. Water is life, and really appreciate that you guys coming. And this is something. 31%, is it, the hike in water prices? So many people should be able to get behind that. How is it they're making millions and millions in profit for their shareholders, and our prices are going up by 31%?
And we do send out emails regularly, so you'll hear more about the campaign and how to get involved.
Brilliant stuff. All right, Emily, Take Back Water crew, get involved, help them out. Let's network it. Reclaim the water. Thanks very much.